Dear colleagues, dear friends, I am honored and delighted to be with you today at this amazing global event, International Conference on Identity, Stories Shaping Self and Society. And I'm happy to represent Karazin Kharkiv National University, Kharkiv, Ukraine, in our common cause of promoting holistic research of identity in its integrity of personal, cultural, social, and digital dimensions, reconceptualizing our understanding of the human and non-human, of identity, cognition, ecology of personality, and language issues, of human relationship with nature. Today, together with you, we are going to concentrate on such a digital narration dimension as multimodality, with a focus on the concept ecology as ecology of identity, regarded through the interdisciplinary lens of posthumanism. We are all aware of the fact that cognitive, linguistic, literary, cultural ethics research has ventured into a brave new world in recent decades. Digital humanities of posthumanism, eco-criticism, the new vitalism, and other related approaches, transforming the critical environment, reinvigorating our encounters with familiar texts, inviting us to take note of new or neglected ones. A vast array of non-human nature-related creatures, things, and forces are now emerging as important agents in their own right, forming both human and post-human ecology. Inspired by human concern for our planet, we have grappled with the question of how important works of art, especially digital art narrative, incorporating cinematography of the 21st century as dynamic literature or literature in action, can be helpful to the preservation of something we have traditionally called nature and ecology as a domain of identity. Yet, digital narrative's capacity to take us on unexpected journeys through the network's affiliation and affinity we share with the earth on which we dwell, and to confront us with the drama of our common struggle to survive and thrive, has not diminished in the face of what Lynn White Jr. called our post-human ecological crisis. In the era of posthumanism, our identity becomes fluid, no longer confined to the limitations of our genetic makeup. We can shape our own evolution, redesigning our bodies and minds to match our aspirations. This new identity will be shaped by a multitude of factors, including our own genes, technological enhancements, and our interactions with intelligent machines. But the evolution of human identity goes beyond mere physical and cognitive enhancements. It also encompasses our relationship with the environment and other species. Posthumanism challenges us to rethink our place in the ecosystem, to consider the ethical implications of our actions, and to strive for a more harmonious coexistence with the natural world. In the time of the post-human, in which the physical, digital, and biological domains co-evolve and interact, and in which the boundaries of human identity are blurred and our position in the universe questioned, narratives in their digital embodiment emerge as an extremely fruitful field in which to explore these emerging contradictions. Posthumanists see the current situation with human ecology in its versatile aspects as further intensification of what is fundamentally wrong with the human, with an urgent need to dramatically change the existing anthropocentric viewpoints. And cinematic narratives, as visual art dimensions, as literature dimensions, have most actively engaged with these debates for decades. In this connection, the topic of my research, whose fragment I would like to share with you, is concept post-human ecology of identity in English language cinematic discourse as a digital narrative, a multimodality dimension. It should be pointed out that the ecology of identity refers to a framework that views identity as shaped by the complex interactions between individuals and their environment, similar to how ecological systems function. It emphasizes that our sense of self is not solely internal, but is deeply influenced by our physical surroundings, social interactions, and cultural contexts. Just as organisms in an ecosystem are interdependent, individuals are interconnected with their environment and the people within it. Identity, in the complexity of its ecology, is dynamic and evolving, multifaceted, greatly influenced by physical environment, social and cultural contexts. Moreover, the ecology of identity provides a lens for understanding how individuals develop a sense of self in various contexts. And by understanding how our identity is connected to the environment, we can foster a greater sense of responsibility towards the natural world, at the same time promoting empathy and understanding between individuals as well. A wealth of studies of various types of discourse has been accumulated in language, literature, philosophy, sociology, but multisemiotic discourse as a digital narrative continues to be of great interest to scientists. Considering cinematic discourse as a polycode digital narrative media, the focus is on multimodal representations of conceptual metaphors with the conceptual referent that belongs to the domain posthuman ecology of identity, in English, ecological cinematic discourse on the basis of scripts, literature pieces, digitally presented scientific articles, papers, and documentaries. The work has proved to be actual for at least two reasons. First, it is the need for a new post-humanistic interpretation of metaphorical meaning creation in cinematic digital narratives with the help of the theory of multimodality. Second, it is vital importance of identity ecological issues for posthumanism linguistics, literature studies, and digital humanities of the 21st century on the whole. The subject matter is the metaphorically represented key posthumanism concept ecology of identity, further referred to as just ecology, in English documentaries, relegating humanity back to one of many natural species, thereby rejecting any possible claims of anthropocentric dominance. The conceptual nucleus here is that humans have no inherent rights to destroy nature or set themselves above it in ethical considerations a priori. The object of the work is multimodality of digital narrative conceptual metaphors with the referent ecology in English ecological documentaries. The aim is to reveal peculiarities of the interaction of verbal, visual, and audio digital narration ways of actualizing metaphors of the concept ecology of identity in English cinematic posthumanism discourse as a dimension of dynamic literature. The tasks of the research, which are on the slide, explicate the novelty of the project. The material of the analysis is 3,000 fragments of ecological cinematic documentary digital narratives. The unit of our analysis is a multimodal metaphorical unity whose basis is a discursively contextualized digital narrative. In particular, the following issues have been brought to light. First, conceptual metaphors that are represented in ecological post-humanist cinematic digital narratives are proved to be semantic unities construed in the interaction of heterogeneous semiotic modes. Second, for ecological post-humanist documentary digital narratives, we have developed an algorithm of multimodal analysis of conceptual metaphors with the referent belonging to the domain ecology of identity as ecology, whose multimodality genesis is on the slide that is in front of you. As a result of our research, we have come up with the idea of the genesis or development of the multimodal concept ecology. Everything starts at the level of our experience, the way we perceive this reality. Everybody has his or her idea of ecology, identity, nature, environment, its colors, smells, tastes, images as facets of a biological, sociological, and cultural identity in all its complexity. All this is reflected on the cognitive level, in our mind. It is already already not real ecology, but it is idea, its mental representation. So appears the posthumanism concept ecology of identity, or the conceptual blend posthuman ecology of identity. Next, this concept gets represented semiotically through science. It can be realized digitally, verbally, and non-verbally. As we see, on the verbal level, in digital narratives in life, we deal with language representations or realizations of the concept ecology of identity, or just ecology, in our case, in discourse of documentaries. It can be done by means of primary nominations of the concept, its name and synonymous variants of the name, and by means of secondary nominations, like associations, metaphors. On the non-verbal digital level, the concept is actualized visually and audially. In this way, multimodality of the concept ecology of identity is fully realized. Finally, we have revealed meanings actualized by the metaphors analyzed and combinatory models of their verbal, visual, and audio components. The methods we have used are empirical, descriptive, conceptual, contextual, and multimodality analysis. Now, let's actually turn to the major outcomes of our research. First, we have come up with our own interpretation of conceptual metaphors. Following George Lakoff and Mark Johnson, as well as John Barton and his article Metaphor and Metonymy, making their connections more slippery, and Forceville's course in multimodal metaphor. Therefore, we define a conceptual metaphor as a discursive construct that represents interaction between at least two conceptual domains and influences human emotions. As a result of our analysis, we have come up to the conclusion that ecological cinematic digital narratives as fluid literature constructs, discourse of documentaries in our case, have at least four major features. They are multimodality, expressiveness, metaphorical nature, and the potential to impact construing reality. Besides, we have found out that multimodal metaphors of ecological documentary digital narratives are realized through verbal, visual, and audio modes of the posthumanism concept ecology of identity. Second, the verbal mode of metaphors is represented by means of spoken and written language. It functions both as the basis of multimodality and as a source of new metaphorical meanings. Third, the visual mode. It is represented through images. They include visual support, frame structures, and cinematographic digital narrative compositions. This mode has three main functions that we have revealed. They are to illustrate the referent or the correlate, to provide metaphorical mapping, and to influence feelings and emotions. Next, the audio mode. It is music and sounds. The functions of this mode are to express the conceptual correlate and to create moods and the right vibes. Finally, we have come up with 9 models of interaction of verbal, visual, and audio digital narrative modes, determined by the documentary posthumanism message of the director. Speaking about the influence that multimodal metaphors have on human cognition and emotions, we have come up with a number of positive and negative discursive digital narrative effects. And they are on the slide. Here is one example of the way multimodal metaphors work.
We're taking away the ecosystems that normally help us to restabilize the climate. Like oceans, we're taking away the ecosystems that normally help us to restabilize the climate. Like oceans, rainforests absorb carbon from our atmosphere. Decades and decades of the forest breathing in the carbon, storing it in the trunks and the leaves and the organic matter. So those carbon emissions are being held safe for us. Until we clear them and light them on fire, it acts like a carbon bomb.
In the case of the documentary narrative Before the Flood, the correlate is forest devastation, and it helps us to understand the referent, a carbon bomb, from the conceptual domain ecology better. In its verbal mode, it is represented by the words light them on fire, a carbon bomb, massive carbon emission. Its visual component is on the slide. As for the audio aspect, it is gloomy, tense background music, which makes you feel really worried, concerned, and apprehensive. And the referent carbon bomb is represented verbally, as you see on the slide, and visually. All this is an instance of Model 4, of digital narrative mode interaction of multimodal metaphors. We are living in a time of global crisis. Drastic climate change is already visible around the world. Overpopulation of humans is becoming ever worse. Freshwater sources are becoming scarce, and the world's sixth mass extinction is currently underway. As these issues are pertinent to the future of humans and all of Earth's species today, a vital aspect of environmental activism is teaching young people how to both think and live ecologically. It is paramount, it is ultimately important for us as educators to shape the identity of future generations in the right way, in harmony with nature, in harmony with their mind, emotions, and heart. Of course, people and programs all over the world have tried many ways of teaching our youth about environmentalism, and yet not much has changed. That's not surprising, given that it seems hard for a young person to get truly invested in these issues and how they are affected by them when they can't physically see the damage. It's one thing to explore a patch of wilderness and feel connected to it or appreciate the beauty, and a completely different thing to be open to changing one's ways and identity in order to protect nature and ecology. It is especially difficult to get young people invested in ecological thinking and living when their experiences with the environment vary so widely based on many factors, including class, race, gender, geographical location, many other things. So what that new approach suggests, it can be taken to attempt to get young people invested, or let's say to get young people involved in the issues that are hazardously affecting their own world. From a pedagogical or eco-pedagogical perspective, taking all the outcomes of the research conducted into account and taking our aim to build a harmonious or well-rounded, well-balanced identity, we propose looking at the environment through a more familiar lens, the lens of identity. Now, closer to more practical terms. In general, people, especially young people who are at the age where they are finding themselves, like to talk about and explore their own identities. However, when environmentalism or ecology is mentioned, let alone ecology of identity, people tend to zone out, because even those who see its importance find it hard to get truly invested in something when they can't see how it directly affects them as individuals. Thus, I believe it could make great difference in ecological education to draw this connection between the environment or ecology of identity and the individual or identity as it is. There is loss of wilderness, sure, but one of the things that is lost is the element of quest, of personal wildness. And this quest for personal wildness is exactly what I want to explore, taking into account the results of our work as a route for teaching ecological thinking and living. Let's discuss below how ideas of an ecological pedagogy geared towards a high school identity club that begins with the approach of expanding our sense of identity to include thinking about our identity in the ecology or in the environment. The hopeful outcome of this approach would be to help young people, high school students, our future generation understand the environment, the ecology, as part of their individual identities, to be invested in the issues that affect our environments, and to see ourselves multimodally as part of many greater social and ecological systems that are all connected, much like fractals in nature. Fractals in nature make a lovely metaphor for talking about teaching ecological thinking through the lens of identity. For instance, the fractal-like nature of the veins in a leaf could represent the different, interconnected, and complex aspects of an individual's identity: race, gender, class, religion, education, social status, emotional, affectional peculiarities, etc. If you then back up a level, however, you begin to see how that individual leaf, with its complex fractal behavior, is connected to an ever larger fractal pattern of branches on a tree. As you keep backing up, you can see how this little, seemingly insignificant leaf is holistically connected to the local and global ecosystem. This image is analogous to finding your own identity's connections to the larger social and ecological systems of the world. It speaks to the interconnectedness of identity and ecological thinking in terms of language, in terms of multimodal fractals. I also like this metaphor because it evokes a sense of lively creation and growth. I believe that it is important for those fighting for social and ecological justice to take an approach of presenting facts that invite participation rather than fear-based apathy. In other words, on the basis of what we have come up with, I would argue for teaching from the perspective of acknowledging the many ways that the human race has damaged the global ecosystem and environment, looking at it as ecology of one's identity, yet recognizing that there is time to act and that change can be made through creation. After many years of hard work at this issue, I have come up with several ideas for creative and constructive ways to help the students in this high school identity environment begin to expand their sense of personal identity to include their identity in the environment and global ecosystem, and to begin thinking ecologically, both vital for students and for us, their educators. The first of these approaches is through spoken word poetry or through literature. Students would be invited to write "I am from" poems while they have the chance to discuss different aspects of what they are from. This could include physically or environmentally aspects of what they are from, their cultural backgrounds they're from, social family grounds they're from, and other aspects of their identity or life experiences that they see as important factors in shaping their current identity, their current ecology. I have participated in an activity like this before, and I have developed a number of them, and I think this would be a great starting point for students to begin to draw connections between their identities and their personal environments. Without even prompting them to think specifically about the environment, it could be very interesting to just see how ecology and identity are represented in their poems or in their pieces of narration. This would spark great discussion about what constitutes an environment, what constitutes an ecology, different types of it that we live in and experience, including both rural, city environments as well as social environments, where our homes are and where we are comfortable, and how our different identities affect how we experience various types of environment. It could also be fun and beneficial to do several iterations of this "I'm from" poem or piece of narration exercise. Students could be asked to do it again, writing from their perspective as a young child to explore how they may have viewed their identities and interacted with ecology in similar or different ways back then. Remember, Campbell eloquently says, "Children, we are in perfect harmony with nature, but then lose that harmony as we develop the barrier of itself." Perhaps through this poetry or through these little pieces of narration created by their own, students can begin to deconstruct this barrier of self and see how their ever-evolving identities have influenced their connections, lack of connections, to nature. Another iteration they could do is writing an "I'm from" poem or piece of narration from the perspective of a non-human being in nature, an animal, a plant, etc. This exercise could help them begin to see non-human beings as having identities as well within local and global ecosystems, and could again help with expanding the students' views of what individual identity means in the context of the environment. Morton says of ecological thought that it is the thinking of interconnectedness. So, a possible activity to help students and us educators begin to think about ecological networks and global interconnectedness, both amongst people and the nature or the natural environment, could be using the data of contact points. Students could start by closing one of the ways they express their identities: fashion, art, music, and be asked to briefly research things like where the materials, clothing, paint, instruments, whatever, were made. Who might these materials connect you to around the world? And further, what natural things the materials are made of, and where those natural substances might have come from. It would be an interesting way to show how expression such as art or literature is ecological insofar as it is made from materials and exists in the world. This activity could make the students begin to think about how even these simple tools of expression connect them to the vast social and ecological networks around the world. To further this exploration of ecological interconnectedness of language, mind, emotions, and human identities in these networks, I have designed another activity that would help demonstrate how human actions actively affect the lives of non-human beings. Students would be given a diagram of a local ecosystem that showed a selection of species, including humans, animals, plants, and microbial beings, and short descriptions of the basic relationships between the different groups. The students would be assigned a non-human identity in this ecosystem and then be told that something in the ecosystem has changed because of a human action. Trees were cut down, a particular species was killed off or eliminated, or something like this. The students would then work together to figure out the chain of events and trace the results of that one single action to see how it affects or damages their non-human identity and how it affects the whole ecosystem of their identity. Though not focused so much on individual human identity, the activity would serve to demonstrate the interconnectedness of ecosystems, how our human actions affect the lives of beings around us, and why diversity in all senses, including biodiversity, is important. It would also be a chance for the students to step into the shoes of another being and see how incredibly valuable non-human lives are. Everybody's story is vital to the integrity of the whole, including one's own. Once Anthony and so say. I would argue that this is true both of human individuals and of non-human beings. All stories are vital to the integrity of the global ecosystem, and identity is part of it. This idea of valuing stories is actually a wonderful way, from my point of view, to wrap back around to the I am from poems or pieces of narration with which the students started, as would hopefully be seen with the individual I am from poems and the non-human poems or pieces of narration. Every being, from each unique human down to each deep ocean jellyfish, has a story that is important and valuable in the world's ecological networks. Perhaps these stories are the pathway to expanding our sense of identity to include the ecology, to include the environment. Though I would not expect these students to take this ecological education experience and immediately go become radical activists, I do hope that as young, impressionable students who are exploring their own identities, they might begin to recognize their environment, their ecology, and their places in local and global ecosystems as larger fractals of their identity quests. And perhaps this will inspire them to think and act ecologically in their own ways. If enough young people were able to expand their sense of identity in this way, to see the fractal-like, interconnected ecology of personal identity and global ecology, it could potentially make a huge difference in the fight for social, cultural, and environmental justice around the world. We may be in a time of global ecological crisis of identity as well. But by looking at environmental or ecological pedagogies through the lens of identity, perhaps, keeping fingers crossed, hopefully, we can begin to work upwards from where we stand now and merge once more with Earth's ecology as unique individual members of a vast global network that is as diverse, complex, and beautiful as fractals in nature and ecology of identity. The perspective of our work, therefore, is to study transmedia aspects of digital narrative multimodal conceptual metaphors of identity ecology in media linguistics, digital linguoculturology, and language ecophilosophy within the framework of posthumanism, cognitive and emotiological paradigms. At the same time, our mainstream perspective parallel perspective is to develop the corresponding ecologically oriented identity growing programs, activities, curricula to help young people realize, to help us as educators realize and become more aware of vital importance of seeing the holistic picture of all this interconnectedness of ecology, identity, making it one valuable, transparent, and harmonious ecology of identity. At this point, I'd like to thank you for your attention, to wish you a bright, joyful, harmonious ecology of your identity. And I wish you peace. I wish you love and all the best. Thank you very much.